If you're a baby boomer or know someone who is, you need to watch this video. In 1980, the top 1% of Americans owned 23% of this nation's wealth. Today, right now, they own 31%. Now, that's an 8-point swing. Sounds small, right? Well, it isn't. 8 points of this U.S. economy equals roughly $19 trillion. I didn't stutter. $19 trillion. That money didn't come out of thin air. Now, let me tell you a secret rich people don't want you to know. The money came from you and me. It came from our parents. It came from 40 years of well-thought-out policy decisions made deliberately by people who knew exactly what they were doing. This is where that money went, and this is who took it. You're watching Clear Signal. Today, we're analyzing the evidence. We're going to name names, and we're going to show you with Federal Reserve data, with CBO numbers, with the text of legislation signed into law, how the largest upward wealth transfer in American history happened and who engineered it. We'll also explain how the Trump administration just put that wealth transfer into overdrive to benefit him and his family. Now, a word to you boomers. You did not fail to save enough money. The system was redesigned around you. It was redesigned while you were working to feed your family and helping make the United States the most prosperous nation on earth. Let's get into it. It all starts in 1981. Ronald Reagan takes office with a theory. He called it supply-side economics. The press called it trickle-down economics. The pitch was simple. Cut taxes on the wealthy, and they'll invest in America, create high-paying jobs. There will be massive business growth. Workers will prosper. America hits the jackpot, and everybody wins. Not so fast, people. Here's what actually happened. The top marginal income tax rate, what the richest Americans paid on their highest earnings, was 70% when Reagan took office. 70%. Seems high, right? Well, hold on here. During Franklin Roosevelt's presidency, the top marginal tax rate reached 79%, peaking at 94%. That seems high, right? Not really. You see, the rich still prospered in a big way. They used a variety of deductions and loopholes to reduce their tax bill. They were encouraged to reinvest profits in the company and raise employee compensation. But the rich wanted tax breaks, and Reagan agreed. The problem was that Reagan's supply-side economics never really worked. He missed the one word that underwrites American economics today: greed. By 1986, after 2 Reagan tax bills, the marginal tax rate for the rich was 28%. 28% down from 70%. That's not a tax cut. That's a structural transfer of obligation, of the country's wealth, from the people who could afford it the most to the people who couldn't afford it at all. Now here's where I want you to stay with me for a moment. The same year Reagan signed that first tax cut, 1981, a new kind of retirement account was gaining traction. That's right, the 401k. I talked about this in my last video. Baby boomers can't escape this trap. It had been created by accident in the 1978 tax code, but corporations now saw their opening. Their opening to pillage the American middle class. Before 1981, your employer gave you a pension, a defined benefit, a guaranteed monthly check. Your company took all the investment risk. But after 1981, they handed that risk to you in the form of a 401k. It was now up to you, the employee, to take on the investment risk. They walked away from their obligation and handed it to people who had very little understanding of managing investments. Let's take a look at what happened next. Between 1983 and 2013, the share of private sector workers with a traditional pension collapsed from 62% to 17%. That's a 45% decrease in companies offering traditional pensions. If you were a boomer entering your peak earning years in the 1980s, this is the moment the deal changed on you. And nobody announced it on the evening news. Nobody warned you of the danger. Numbers don't lie when analyzed properly. and we're going to analyze these properly. Let me show you what 4 decades of this policy looks like in raw numbers. Now, this is the Federal Reserve's data, not my opinion. This is the Fed's own accounting. 1989 is the earliest year the Fed tracks this data in earnest. The top 1% held 22.8% of all U.S. net worth. In 2024, it went up to 30.8%. That's an 8% increase in the top 1%'s wealth. Now, in 1989, the bottom 50% of Americans held about 3% of the nation's wealth. Today, well, that number is 2.5%. Here's where the evidence gets damning. During that same period, 1989 to 2024, U.S. worker productivity increased by over 70%. You see, employee productivity is a very big deal. It is the measure of the efficiency and effectiveness with which employees complete tasks and contribute to organizational goals. It encompasses both the volume of work produced, the quality of that work, and the impact and innovation behind that work. So productivity went up 70%, but median wages of the workers, adjusted for inflation, went up about 15% over 35 years. That's not much of a pay increase after all those years of busting your butt, right? Because the workers were more productive, the company made more money, but their bosses kept all the gains. And 40 years of tax policy made sure that money never came back down to those workers. Think about that for a minute. You worked harder, you produced more, and the people at the top they got richer. Not in spite of your work, but because of it. That's not capitalism. That's crony capitalism. That's a rigged machine. And baby boomers who spent decades working inside this machine are the ones holding an empty bag at the end. We already did the math on this last video. Median boomer savings, $185,000. Investment experts like Fidelity say you need about $600,000 to retire properly. At 4% withdrawal on $185,000, it equals about $617 a month. That's not a retirement. That's what we call rationing. Welcome to crony capitalism. Before I move forward, if you believe this video has helped you understand the crime of wealth redistribution, please consider subscribing right now. Hit the like button and share it with those who you believe need to hear this clear signal message. Thank you, and let's continue with this video. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. David, this is just how the markets work. Some people win, some people don't. No, stop right there. This was not the market working. These were corrupt policies at work, exactly as they were designed. Let me give you 3 mechanisms, 3 engineered levers. Pull any one of them, and the wealth concentrates at the top. Pull all 3 simultaneously for 40 years, and you get what we now have. Mechanism 1, the tax rate collapse. Now, we already covered Reagan's cuts, but it didn't stop there. No, it didn't. There were the Bush cuts of 2001 and 2003. Then came the 2017 Trump tax cuts and Job Act, which permanently slashed the corporate rate from 35% to 21% and handed the top 1% a $50,000 a year average tax reduction. More recently, Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill will deliver over $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1% over the next 10 years. Every cut was sold as relief for the workers, relief for the middle class. Every analysis has shown the gains went to the top. The Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, which is nonpartisan, scores every bill. Their data shows this. The top 1% captured 15 times the income gains of the bottom 20% from the 2017 tax cuts. That's 15 to 1. Remember, the middle class loses every time. From 2025 through 2026, the wealthiest 1% of households are projected to receive a significant share of the benefits from Donald Trump's one big beautiful bill, with estimates indicating they will receive over $117 billion in tax cuts in 2026 alone. The top 1% will receive an average tax cut of between $60,000 and $89,000 in 2026, representing roughly a 2.9 increase in their after-tax income. Crazy. Mechanism number 2, deregulation and financialization. Deregulation. Bankers and investors love that word. It means the removal of government oversight. In 1933, the Glass-Steagall Act was passed to regulate banks and separate commercial banking from investment banking and prevent speculative investments like the ones that contributed to the 1929 stock market crash. The banks complained that these Depression-era banking rules didn't apply in 1981, so Reagan dismantled them. The era of deregulation began. In 1982, the Garn-St. Germain Act was passed, unleashing risky expansion by allowing savings and loans to invest in high-risk commercial real estate and equities. What can go wrong? Remember, it was this kind of deregulation that led to the savings and loan crisis and the 2008 financial crisis. Same playbook, same result. Banks also took bigger risks for bigger reward. When they won, their shareholders won. When they lost, the taxpayers bailed them out. Every time. Every financial crisis of the last 40 years redistributed wealth upward. The people with assets bought the wreckage cheap. The people without assets lost their jobs and homes. Boomers who lost homes in 2008 are still recovering, but some may never recover. Mechanism 3, the buy, borrow, die loophole. This is the one they don't want to talk about, and you'll never hear about, except here. The ultra-wealthy don't earn income the way you do. They hold assets, stocks, real estate, businesses. These assets grow, and this wealth is passed on to their heirs without paying capital gains taxes. Not until they sell. So they live tax-free. Here's how it works. Instead of selling these assets, they borrow money from the banks, using these appreciated assets as collateral. They may even deduct business expenses on their taxes. These people live on these bank loans. They die. Their heirs inherit these assets. And through a mechanism called stepped-up basis, the capital gains tax is wiped out completely. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, they pay a lower effective tax rate than a nurse in Pittsburgh. That's not a glitch. That's an ingenious design to silently suck wealth from the middle class. In 2026, Trump accelerates the wealth transfer. Now let's get to the part they really don't want you to see. Trump's second term began January 20th, 25, literally surrounded at the inauguration by the 10 richest men in America. Here's what happened in Trump's first year. This data comes from Americans for Tax Fairness, analyzing Forbes data. In 2025, Trump's first full year back in office, U.S. billionaire wealth grew 22%, from $6.7 trillion to $8.2 trillion. That's $1.5 trillion richer in 1 year. Meanwhile, the same year, Trump and his Republican Congress cut SNAP, Medicaid, and the Affordable Care Act tax credits for the poor and vulnerable. This tax credit helped people with income between 100 and 400% of the federal poverty guidelines purchase health insurance through the marketplace. This means health care premiums have doubled in 2026, while some people are seeing a 114% increase. Obviously, many won't be able to pay for health care. Trump and the Republicans literally took from the people who need government assistance the most and handed it to the people who need it the least, the richest people in our country. Now, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, this act of greed was called the One Big Beautiful Bill. Over the next decade, this legislation, signed and passed in 2025, will cut taxes for the richest 10% of Americans by more than $14,700 per year per household. The richest 1%, $50,000 a year. $4.5 trillion in tax cuts. $1 trillion of it goes directly to the top 1%. At the same time, $1.1 trillion cut from SNAP, Medicaid, and other health programs. Programs that boomers and their families depend on. And that's okay with the Republican Congress. So once again, they changed the deal. They passed it in spite of the objections of millions of American citizens. And for Trump himself, well, he's an expert at fleecing people. The estate tax threshold was doubled under Trump, now over $13 million per person. Trump's personal estate, valued in the billions, will be passed on to his heirs with a fraction of the tax burden you'd pay if you left your house to your kids. His crypto ventures, his meme coin, launched days before his second inauguration, made insiders hundreds of millions of dollars while retail buyers absorbed the losses. This is not policy that benefits you. This is a sitting president enriching himself while signing legislation that moves your retirement money uphill permanently and leaves millions of baby boomers struggling to retire. Here's my prediction signals that you should watch out for. Here's the evidence. Signal 1. Social Security is next. Doge, remember them? Musk's cost-cutting operation? Well, they've already been inside the Social Security Administration. Staffing cuts, system access. The political groundwork for reform was being laid. Watch for the word means testing in the next 18 months. That's the signal. Means testing Social Security is how you reduce benefits without calling it a cut. Watch out for it. Listen for it. Signal 2. The inheritance gap will widen. Boomers who couldn't build wealth because 40 years of policy extracted it will pass on less to their Gen Z and millennial children. The wealth gap doesn't just harm boomers. It compounds into the next generation, keeping the wealth securely nestled in the upper class. The heirs of the wealthy will receive the great wealth transfer. The heirs of middle-class boomers will receive less benefits, higher taxes, and possibly a used car. Signal 3. The next financial crisis will move the clock. They are deregulating again. Banking rules are being rolled back even as I make this video. History does not repeat, but it rhymes with eerie precision. When the next crash comes, and the evidence says it's coming, the pattern will be the same. The people with assets will buy the wreckage. The people without will absorb the loss. It's really that simple. Here's the verdict. The great wealth transfer didn't happen because the system failed. It happened because the system worked exactly as the people who designed it intended. Reagan lowered the drawbridge. Every administration since, Republican and Democrat, kept it down. Trump went all out. He didn't just keep the drawbridge down, he widened the moat. Baby boomers didn't fail to prepare for retirement. They were the target of the longest, most successful financial extraction in American history. And they did it while they were working double shifts, raising kids, and believing the promise of a better life. That promise was a lie. Share this video because your neighbor, your sibling, your parent, someone in your life is watching their retirement disappear and blaming themselves. They need to know it wasn't their fault. It was a design, and designs can be exposed. This has been Clear Signal. I'll see you next time.